I don't think I could have finished this project without the built-in camera on this bolt. Today, on LaserNug. Welcome back. Today I had an interesting project I needed to do for someone. 25-inch piece of cherry, designed right in the middle of the crown, and a 12 by 20-inch workspace. Let me give you the backstory. It's a piece of seasoned cherry wood. Cherry wood happens to be my favorite hardwood of all. The gentleman who needed this project done actually fells the tree himself, bucks it up, puts it on his portable mill, mills his boards, and then he seasons them for at least 2 years before he starts to make cabinets or furniture or different types of woodworking projects after the fact. He's currently working on a cabinet, and it's a steel cabinet. You know, lots of scrolls and inlays and those kind of things on it. And so he rough cut this piece of wood for me to fit into an inlay on the cabinet and asked for a few designs to be done, primarily a circular one right here in the middle of the board. I knew it was 25 inches, and I knew I could open the door on the bolt. So I thought I could simply just slide the piece in, set it up, engrave the different parts of the cherry, and I'd be done. But after I put the cherry in, I realized that on 25 inches, the exact middle of this crown is at 12.5 inches, far exceeding the y-axis length that you have on the bolt. Given that the primary or the main design on this backboard needs to sit square in the middle, I realized I was in trouble. Finally realized that the best way, or the only way I was going to get this design smack in the middle of the crown, was to put the piece of cherry on an angle. And that caused me a little pause, because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to somehow calculate this angle in Lightburn in order to allow it to engrave perfectly square on the piece when it comes out. So I came pretty close to calling him and saying, I'm sorry, I can't do this job for you because I can't get the board in properly and I can't make what I would believe to be a high quality engrave on the exact angle necessary. And then I remembered the bolt has a built-in camera, because now I can accurately match the angle of the wood on the honeycomb, line up my design perfectly and perfectly square to the piece, and then engrave it. Let's get her done. Measuring the board 25 inches end to end, I used my square, found exactly the middle of the board, and I made a pencil mark so I have some form of reference. And in case it was handy, I took the square, found the center between the top and the bottom, and I made another pencil mark so I know exactly where the center of the crown is to the bottom. I'm going to make sure the cap is off my camera. I keep it there to keep it dust free. I'm going to open up the front, and I'm going to slide my cherry wood in, and I want to make sure it's on an angle where it's not going to obstruct any type of Z movement or autofocus. I've got it across the piece, and I've got the center clearly in an engravable area. I'm going to turn off my safety on the door. She's flashing red. I'm using the 1.5-inch lens for this engrave. It engraves cherry beautifully. Before I head into Lightburn or take any pictures with this camera on my desktop, I'm going to autofocus the piece. I've also learned never to move the laser after I've set up a design ready to send to the bolt, because the camera is going to use absolute coordinates. Let's jump in and get her done. Here's the primary design for the middle of that backboard. Just going to blow it up for us all here. All of my pieces are here. It's going to be an engrave only. I don't believe the bolt can cut 3/4 inch cherry, but I haven't tried yet. And I'm at some point going to try different widths or thicknesses to see just what we can cut through. But I'm going to highlight my piece here because it's done. I'm going to go into my library. I'm going to pull up my bamboo settings for engrave. And I want the dark engrave. And that's what I'm going to assign. You can see now my fill layer, my black fill layer, the speed and power have changed. I'll go back to the laser. I just want to take a look, play this back so I can see what it's going to engrave like. And that is exactly what I'm looking for. Workshop Cafe, we're all good. It's about a 35-minute engrave because I'm only at 400 millimeters per second. Okay. I know that I only have about 4 inches to play with in that center space, because once I'm done with it, he's going to do a router job around the edge, and then he's going to final sand it, because that was just a rough cut he provided me, and then I imagine he's going to treat it with something. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change my width to 4 inches, which should change my height, which it did. So there's the size of my workable design. Just going to move it out of the way here. And let's roll over here to the right side to my camera control tab. Okay, I'm going to come to the top and pick my camera, which will be the bolt. And that's this KS582361. I'm going to click that. And there is a picture of what you see in the bolt currently. I'm going to come up here and click Update Overlay, and I should see it clearly on my workspace here in Lightburn. Now you may or may not have noticed, but right down here, as soon as I updated the overlay, this option changed from user origin to absolute coordinates. Now what I need to do is grab my design. I'm going to get it down in here, and I want to turn it. And what I'm trying to do is line up my design with my pencil strokes that I put on the piece. Okay, a little bit more. I'm going to move this around, because that should sit roughly like that. I want to make sure that my center, or my center point, sits right here. I'm just going to fade the background for a minute. That's better. And now I can make sure that my center is in fact centered. So I've already auto-focused. I'm on absolute coordinates down here on the right. I've already set my layer for its speed and power. I've centered the design right square in the middle of the target, and I'm ready to run. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click Send. I'm going to frame the outline, and it should square up right in the center of that crown on the piece. And it does. Here we go. For the most part to date, most of my dabbling in any types of woods have been plywoods or Baltic birch. I'm beginning to really enjoy working with real wood, and in this case, cherry engraves beautifully on the bolt. I use the same settings as I set up for bamboo, and it provides a really nice, deep, and colorful engrave, and it cleans up pretty easy just with a light sanding. If you'd like the settings I use on the cherry wood as well as the bamboo, I'll put a link to a video here. I've created 3 different settings, one for a light engrave, one for kind of a medium engrave, and one for a dark engrave. And I think today I'm going to use the dark engrave on this piece of wood. So here's what it's going to look like when it comes out of the bolt. This is the dark setting, as I mentioned, so you're always going to get a lot more residue. He still has to final sand this and clean it up and router it, but I'm going to just throw some 220 and 320 grit on this just to clean it up for you so that you'll see what it looks like when it's completed. Turned out pretty nice, I think. The next time I need to do this, I'm just going to grab the pencil in Lightburn. I'm going to draw a long line, and then I'm going to angle it and match it on top of one of my score marks on the piece. In this case, right across that target or the crosshairs. That way these old eyes could see it a little bit better, because once I dragged my design over it, it became a little harder to see my pencil marks, but I think it would have showed up much clearer, and I could have adjusted for that tiny, tiny difference. Because when you're selling a product, you've got to make it perfect. But either way, if you take a look at the piece, you'll see that the engrave is a beautiful color on cherry. It also engraves very nicely. I was literally maybe a minute and a half sanding off the residue from this cherry wood, and it's come up really beautifully. Hey, hope that was really helpful for you folks. If you haven't tried hardwoods yet, give it a shot. The bamboo engraves beautifully, easy to clean up. And now the cherry engraves just as beautifully using the same settings, and super easy to clean up. And it looks beautiful afterwards. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to just finish up this piece. I promised a design on each of the wings on either side. We'll get back into Lightburn, finish that up, sand it down, and take it off to them. Thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you found it informative or enjoyable to some degree. Have a great week. Please be kind to one another. And I'll see you again right here. I'm Gord Potter, and you've been watching Laser Nug. Cheers.